how far do you think we have come? Has the position changed from male, pale, and stale? And if so, how far have we come?
Thanks, Laura. I think we are all in agreement that progress has been made in terms of diversity in international arbitration. However, the extent of the progress is a matter of debate. And I would say it differs depending on a variety of factors, including jurisdiction, culture, geographical location. According to the Queen Mary survey, a majority of respondents, I think about 61%, agreed that some progress has been made in relation to gender diversity. But this contrasts sharply with the position for the other aspects of diversity. So we are looking at geographic, age, cultural, and ethnic diversity. The difficulty with this is that it is hard to measure progress in this context. My view is that there has been significant progress in terms of diversity and inclusion. And the first step to rectifying any problem is to first acknowledge and identifying the problem. This we have done. The next important step is to create awareness and to be intentional in making changes and improvement. And I believe this is what we have been doing and continue to do. This is probably, well, I would think the most woke generation in terms of diversity and inclusion in international arbitration. And we need to stay woke and intentional to achieve this objective. Many of us are beneficiaries of progress. As a female arbitration counsel and arbitrator, I've been very fortunate to have had opportunities in my earlier years. And so we continue to advocate for diversity and inclusion. So it's, every generation we do our parts. And the younger ones among us, are beneficiaries of this progress, this continued fight for diversity and inclusion. And we see more and more appointing authorities, as Adrian mentioned earlier, and institutions have taken an active role in this. And we see more members of international arbitration community making the commitment to promote diversity and inclusion. We see a lot more opportunities given to less experienced arbitration practitioners and so on. We also see women taking leadership in major arbitration institutions. Claudia Solomon in ICC, Lucy Reed in C. Of course, we still have some way to go, especially on the other aspects of diversity. And we still have a lot of work to do on leveling the playing field in terms of opportunities for engagement, visibility within the arbitration community, and of course, the pipeline issues. But I certainly think we have moved on from male, pale, and stale, Laura.
Okay, thank you so much, Sharon. And I agree with you that a lot of education for diversity and inclusion needs to keep going on. And for the audience, if you have any questions, now will be a good time to please put them together because we're fast approaching the Q&A segment for this session. So Mrs. Rhodes-Vivour, my question for you is, the argument has always been that arbitration is party driven. And when we're having conversations around diversity and inclusion, how do these impact party autonomy?
Thank you very much, Laura. It's not a negative impact. That's the way I look at it. It's one that calls for need for synergy, that calls for cooperation, and it calls for understanding. We all know arbitration is party driven. We know there's party autonomy. We know you cannot enforce arbitrators on parties. But at the same time, there's got to be an understanding that there's got to be diversity, that it's got to be open, that there's got to be confidence in the system. And once that diverse element is not there, parties begin to lose confidence. I'll give a very, very simple example. For instance, if you walked into a room and every single person in that room was different from you in terms of height, in terms of color, in terms of language, in terms of anything possible that could reveal your differences, you feel very uncomfortable, wouldn't you? And then can you imagine if it's a situation whereby you are expecting this same group of people to decide a matter that's very, very important to you? Even if they come up with the correct outcome based on the facts, based on the legal understanding or the legal authorities, you won't feel comfortable about it. And what happened next? You lose confidence, so you withdraw. So in other words, there's a need for synergy and understanding, even within the ambit of arbitration being based on party autonomy. If you look back years ago, when the regional centers started, what motivated them? The regional centers, the Asians, Africans, they felt they were not being given adequate say in the arbitral process. They felt the arbitration process was basically for the Western Hemisphere. So they decided to create their own regional centers, which emphasizes the need for diversity in arbitration. So it's not something that you can separate. You can't separate it. You must still comply with party autonomy. But at the same time, based on your understanding of the need for diversity, you must work within the ambit to actualize diversity in arbitration, based on, of course, on all the different concepts of diversity: generational, gender, geographical. It's so important. I think, and I quite agree, that the very legitimacy of the arbitral process is premised on diversity and inclusion. And that's where diversity and inclusion must find a balance with party autonomy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ma, for that response. And I agree 100% with what you've said. This brings to mind a story that hit the headlines recently when famous hip hop celebrity Jay-Z had an arbitration, and the AAA was to appoint, I don't know if you're familiar with that story. They were to appoint an arbitrator, and when the list of arbitrators came to him, he said, "I'm sorry, I cannot participate. There's no African American on this panel." So obviously we're dealing with users that are beginning to understand the issue. They're more sophisticated, and they're beginning to understand how these little choices impact the outcome of arbitral proceedings. So I'm now going to ask the panel one question, which everyone would have an opportunity to answer. And this question is around your personal experiences, again, so that we can draw from what you have learned from your years in practice as arbitration and ADR practitioners. And my question to you would be, how would you say, just a moment. Yes. How would you say, and Sarah has had a chance to give us a good example of her experience. So how would you say you've ever missed out on an opportunity or secured an appointment based on considerations around diversity? By that, I mean, because you are either young, female, a certain age, or from a particular region. Please share from your personal experiences. How have these considerations either lost you an opportunity or got you an opportunity? In no particular order, I think we'll start with Sharon, and you have 2 minutes to give us your experience, and then we'll move to all the other panel members.
Okay, thanks, Laura. I think I've had, well, let me start off by saying I've had a lot of opportunities due to diversity and inclusion. But one example of case where I've lost out on opportunity due to the lack of diversity is when I was on the panel of the Southeast Asian Games. And it was the first arbitration panel for the SEA Games, the what we call the Southeast Asian Games, in 2017. And we had, I think, if I recall correctly, there were probably about 5 arbitrators, maybe 5 to 6 arbitrators, majority of which were from Malaysia. And then we had Singapore, Thailand, and Philippines. And that was the first ever panel that was set up for the SEA Games. Before that, there was a different dispute resolution mode. So what happened was we were waiting to be called on to hear any disputes arising from the games. And there was finally one, I think on the last day, on the final day of the games. It was I think to do with ice hockey. And what happened then was that the chairman then set up a panel, and of course I was one of the youngest members of the panel. And unfortunately, I must say, I think it was because of my seniority or my lack of seniority that I was left out from the panel. And it was quite a shame because, you know, it would have been a very good experience for me to have sat on that panel for the Southeast Asian Games, the first ever panel. So that was one sad example, of me losing out due to the lack of diversity. So the ones who was appointed to sit in a panel, they were much more senior to me, and most of them were male, except for one female. I assume there was probably just one spot for female arbitrator, but that's an example of the lack of diversity. It would have been really good to hear a different perspective from a you know from me on that panel. But having said that, I do have a lot of opportunities, and I think I must commend the institutions, the authorities for looking out for the less experienced arbitrators. I know most of these institutions have a reserve panel. They do look out for less experienced arbitrators, where they appoint them or appoint us for the smaller disputes, and that's you know, that's always a good opportunity for us. Thanks, Laura.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Sharon. And such a shame to be left out on the basis of lack of seniority. Perhaps if we have the time, I'll ask you a follow-up question on how you've managed to overcome that in your practice. Next, I think we'll go to Adrian.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I mean, my experience was that I joined the legal profession late. I started my career as a construction professional, having studied engineering rather than law. And when I became a lawyer and tried to get employment in law firms were being of a mind in the UK that unless you had a law degree, you were not committed to the law. And therefore they saw that somebody who had studied another subject first wasn't the sort of person they wanted to have on board. And therefore I found it challenging in the early days to get a foot in the door and to get going at law. Ironically, the situation has changed a full 360 degrees, or at least 180 degrees, because law firms now, especially international firms, recognize that people with other qualifications are more diverse. They recognize that they have something in addition to offer to somebody who's got a pure law degree. And some of the firms I've worked at actually had a policy of encouraging people with alternative qualifications to come and work for them. So I think there's been a massive sea change from when I started. That is to be endorsed. And what it goes to show is that diversity is important. I mean, one of the reasons why I get appointed as an arbitrator is because people want the skill sets and the experience range that I have to offer, because that gives them choice. And they like the idea of having somebody who understands engineering as well as law when it comes to choosing an arbitrator, especially for construction disputes. So I think, in a nutshell, that demonstrates the importance of diversity. So let's hope that these negative experiences are very much a thing of the past, and we all look forward to a much fairer and balanced way of proceeding.
Right. Thank you so much for that, Adrian. Sarah, are you ready? Okay.
Just a quick kind of story again. I've got something different to say. I've refused appointments or refused nominations because I'm not your token girl. So sometimes it's not about they want you on because, you know, they value what you bring, they value your background, they value your experience. They want to tick the box, and it's clear. And when I get told, or I come to know that, you know, you're potentially in the running because you're ethnic, you're a girl, you're all good, I tell them I to go. Like, you get me on because you value who I am and what I bring to the table. I'm not your token girl, and I'm not going to tick the box. Go and get a guy, go and get another girl who wants to do that. And the reason I do that is because I don't believe in, although I'm a massive supporter of diversity inclusion, ensuring people are given the opportunity, equally, it's not a platform to just allow anyone and everyone on just to tick a box, because that's not true diversity and inclusion. That's not really encouraging the way forward. That's just ticking a box to make your stats work out. So I've probably done myself out of work by saying I'm not the go-to token girl by, but I agree with what Adrian says as well. And there's a real impetus on the tribunal, the institutions to push this forward. And what we often hear, and I'm quite closely linked to some of the institutions in the UAE, they say it's not about us not putting the females or the underrepresented forward. It's a mindset of in-house counsel. It's a mindset of those who end up instructing. And when they do, the last thing they're thinking of is gender and diversity and ethnicity. They're thinking, oh, who has a reputation and who's going to be on our side, or whatever they might think. And a mindset needs to be changed from the instructing counsel, because the arbitral institutions say it doesn't matter what we do. Often there's pushback, even from very females, corporate counsel, who don't know somebody and therefore won't use them. So we have initiatives like arbitrator intelligence now, which sets out the soft skills of arbitrators. So when parties are making a decision, they are more informed. And whether that's for a man, a woman, disabled, old, young, it doesn't matter. It's the right person for the job. So I guess my answer to that is, yes, personally, I've refused to be somewhere just to be a tick box exercise. And I would continue to do that.
Excellent. That's an interesting take on that particular question. Thank you. Mrs. Doyin Rotzvaivo, SAN.
Okay, thank you. It's a very interesting question. The first thing that came to my mind is, when people are considering whether to appoint you or not, in the first place, in most circumstances, you don't even know about it. You don't even know the parameters upon which they decide to appoint you. So I wouldn't say I've been discriminated against. No, because I don't know whether I have. I've heard stories of some women that don't want to work with women, which is very bad, but I don't know whether I've ever been discriminated on that basis. But one thing I do know is that hard work, perseverance, training, education, networking with core and like-minded people. And when you give in service to the community that you want to be a part of, it stands you in good stead. So when I get at my appointments, I don't know who's up, I don't know why they've appointed me, but I know that what I've got to do is give of my best. Because as was mentioned, diversity is not meant to be used as token appointments. Diversity is not meant to do women favors. Diversity is not meant to do favors for the African race. Diversity is to enable us to have an equal platform whereby we operate. So in that respect, I can't say I've been discriminated against, but I can say that my hard work, my perseverance, my education, first rate, my training, my passion for the area has stood me in good stead. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so very much, ma'am. So the general thread I hear is we should not sacrifice competence on the altar of diversity. And I couldn't but agree more with every speaker. We can now take questions from the audience, and I will need a little bit of assistance here. If you have any questions, please put up your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. Please keep your questions brief and the panel will try to address them. Thank you.
Thanks to the panel. I really loved the definition that you gave at the beginning about diversity. I will put that in my note. I will never forget that. I was privileged to have been tutored by very professional ladies through CIAB, and over 60%, I would say. So in my view, I think CIAB is doing a fantastic job in that regard. My question though, my question though is really around professional diversity. We've often said that arbitration is not about being a lawyer. I like to ask what deliberate actions we are taking to invite other professions to the party and make sure they dance. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. That's an excellent question. Do you want to give it a shot?
Very good question. Thank you. You're absolutely right. Firstly, arbitration is all about solutions for businesses. It's not a courtroom to determine who's right and wrong as we do in litigation. And part of that is having the engineers, if it's a construction dispute, or those who have the requisite background for a very niche dispute, to be part of that party. And the reason they come to the party is they bring something none of the legally qualified can. So the legally qualified arbitrators may well know the law, and they may be very clever people, but they have no idea about how the industry works. They have no idea about the technicalities. They have no idea about what happens on ground. They know about textbook law, they're clever, they have an idea of what may or may not have transpired, but the expertise that comes from particular arbitrators who are non-legally qualified cannot be underestimated. And we often have the same question when we run events back in the UAE of how do I get more involved? How do I get more included? Well, I think firstly, databases that the various institutions keep need to have those professions that are interested in either sitting or becoming arbitrators. Number two, they should be represented at events like this. There should be non-lawyers speaking. There should be people from the external profession speaking, because by giving them the platform, we're ensuring those who are underrepresented in arbitration are given an opportunity. And equally, when events are sponsored, those sponsors should also ask the relevant questions of, well, who's speaking? Who's the audience? Are you getting in the professions, for example? Because it's very important that they are represented and they are given that opportunity. And to advance that, institutions like the CIR or other worldwide institutions need to encourage those professions or those members to come forward, have their details, invite them, get them involved, and then they get to dance at the party.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Adrian, I know that you were an engineer before you became a lawyer. Do you have a perspective on this particular question?
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I mean, I agree with what Sarah just said about the institutions having a role. Just to give a concrete example of that, the CIR in the Middle East here has started a mentoring program. And as part of that, I have 5 mentees. So I'm mentoring 5 people, and they are all non-lawyers, and they have various technical backgrounds. So I think that is a good sort of initiative that is broadening the profession and making it more diverse. I think also we need to move away from the areas which are common in arbitration. So we all know that shipping, engineering and construction, amongst others, generate a lot of disputes, and those disputes are often resolved in arbitration. But there needs to be more effort made to bring in other professions and bring in other industries into arbitration. There needs to be more effort in banking, finance, insurance. These are all rich areas for arbitration to grow. And in doing so, that not only creates opportunities for lawyers, but also creates opportunities for professionals in those fields. And in doing so, we are then spreading the good word of arbitration more broadly and being a better service to society.
Right. Thank you so much, Adrian. Do we have any other questions? Okay, please, Mrs. Adikwa, I see.
I would like to ask, how can we increase ethnic diversity at the level of arbitral secretaries? Because in international arbitration, invariably the presiding arbitrator has the prerogative of proposing an arbitral secretary if required. And invariably, The international law firms are those who nominate the arbitrators. I have noticed a tendency at the level of international arbitration for us to be not ethnically diverse at the level of arbitral secretaries. How can we change that? Because that's where you get the experience that will enable you move up to the level of becoming an arbitrator.
Right. Excellent question. Thank you very much. I think I will give every panelist 1 minute to answer that question, particularly because of your respective backgrounds and the fact that almost everyone pretty much has worked in different jurisdictions with law firms that operate pretty much globally. So I'll start with Sharon and then Mrs. Rothweiber, then I'll come to Sarah and then Adrian. In 1 minute each.
Thanks, Laura. I think arbitral bodies and organizations play a large role in this to create more. I suppose for my jurisdiction, I think what is probably required is awareness of the diverse list of candidates for these roles. It may be a situation where the law firms and those who are in charge of appointing arbitrators and therefore arbitral secretaries are not aware of the various the different ethnic groups which are involved or who are actively involved in this. So it's a matter of awareness, and I think in my jurisdiction at least, the arbitral organizations play a large role in compiling the list and compiling and introducing this group of diverse ethnicity candidates to the forefront, so that they're out there and they're able to be among the candidates that will be selected for these roles. A second way to do this is to really engage the law firms and to engage those who are involved in this process. And I think there is a lack of awareness especially in terms of arbitral secretaries. There's a lack of awareness of the groups of candidates which are out there, who are available to be appointed or to take on this role as arbitral secretaries. We often focus more on arbitrators, the appointment of arbitrators, the appointment of counsel, and arbitral secretaries tend to take a slightly or tend to be overlooked in my jurisdiction at least. So awareness is most important.
Okay,
Hello.
thank you so much, Sarah. Mrs. Rothweiber, Sayan.
Okay, thank you so much, Laura. I think if we're going to stop paying lip service to the issues surrounding diversity on the basis of ethnicity, I think every player in the system has to get serious. The arbitral institutions, the law firms, and the parties. Arbitral institutions, law firms, they cannot do a lot to encourage diversity on the basis of ethnicity. Law firms, I know some of them are doing it now, offering internships to persons from perceived disadvantaged areas in arbitration, offer secondments, offer internships. How about shadowing, allowing the ethnic backgrounds to shadow proceedings? And I think we have to start doing it in a structured way. And we all have to collaborate on it together and work together on it. I think that's the only way. Stop paying lip service and actually do something to encourage it. Law firms, institutions, parties, counsel, bring people along, and let's start publicizing it. I mean, a lot of inroads has been made with respect to women through the efforts of organizations like ERA Pledge, Arbitral Women, Alliance, and all that. And it's through the efforts of all these organizations that we are beginning to see improvements with regards to the numbers of female appointees. We've got to start doing something really serious with respect to ethnically disadvantaged persons. I know the African Promise also holds a lot of promise in this regard. So it's really an issue that has to be taken seriously. internships. Let's do that. Let them shadow. Let the law firms get serious about it. Because eventually, if we really don't do this, people are going to begin to lose confidence. People are going to feel disadvantaged. They're going to feel that they're not a part of the system. So it's about time we really get serious about it. I mean, I think that's just about the solution that I can offer.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much, Ma. That's an interesting point. Sarah?
Thank you, first. It was an excellent question, very on point. And I agree with what's just been said. I think the responsibility comes from law firms and arbitral institutions. And I'd go one step further. I think there needs to be accountability. I think there needs to be a centralized kind of data of those who are interested in being, for example, secretariat or otherwise. If a law firm is to appoint an arbitrator and it's the usual, one of the usual suspects, they should put forward a list of this is who we have on our database who are potential secretaries. That list should be reflective, inclusive, and diverse. The arbitral institutions should keep a checklist on who's doing what when they're being appointed, who is the secretariat. When that data is then published or released, people are accountable when they know that they're being watched. When there's transparency and there's objectivity, then they're being watched. If it's all being done behind closed doors, we're not able to promote the way we need to promote. But it takes a joint effort from institutions, law firms, and those who are the end user to push that forward. Now, for example, law firms, and they are doing a lot in the UAE and in the UK, I know they're encouraging, for example, scholarships, internships from underrepresented minorities or underrepresented sectors of the public. But they need to go further. They can't just, in my view, mentor these individuals. They need to sponsor them. And even people who are in a position like you or I may be, where we can take on somebody and make a difference. Everybody who does something contributes to the table. So I think sponsoring somebody, you open up your doors, you open up your contacts. The law firms need to take more of an active approach, and the arbitral institutions need to, I'm not saying name and shame, but if they collect data and if there's open, objective evidence to go for, to kind of measure against who's being appointed, who's not, who's missing, and you have the same kind of rolling. Something else I do is employment law, and I always say to my people, who comes through your doors, anonymize your CV and see who actually gets through. But once you actually start keeping the data of who's coming through, who's being promoted, who's getting the appointments, you start to see to ensuring that the law firms or otherwise have to deal with that rather than just tick a box and say, yes, we've signed the ERA and we are, all diverse. It means nothing if they talk the talk without walking the walk.
Agree totally. Thank you very much. Adrian, would you like to close the loop on this conversation?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, I agree with the suggestions and comments that have been made. They are all absolutely spot on. But looking at this just from a slightly different perspective, if I may, and just use some examples. Singapore never used to be the hotbed of international arbitration that it is. So one has to ask themselves, how has that happened? I know Sharon's on the panel. Malaysia has made massive developments in arbitration. Arbitration is very, very strong across the whole of Southeast Asia. It never used to be. The fact that there is a strong culture of arbitration now creates opportunities for people. Those opportunities did not exist. So look at what is happening, look at what is successful and mimic it. Now, the UAE has done exactly that. Arbitration, when I first arrived in the Middle East 15 years ago, wasn't anywhere near as strong as it is now. It didn't have arbitrators who were Arabic. They weren't nationals. They are now. So there has been a development, and that development comes from having strong support. And that support comes from institutions such as the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, such as this conference now, which is creating awareness and an understanding. It's also raising profiles. But it needs strong laws, it needs strong legal systems, it needs smart lawyers to understand how it operates. It needs the fairness and the equal opportunities that the other panelists have been mentioning. But let's use the successful seats, if I can call it that, as models for us all. And there's a lesson for us all to learn from those models.
Right. Thank you so much, Adrian. And I couldn't be happier with this final question and the sorts of answers that have come from all the members of the panel, because in sum, what I've gathered from this conversation is that essentially the responsibility is ours. The people sitting in this room are running the law firms. The people sitting in this room are running the institutions. The people sitting in this room are advising the users. So if we're going to achieve any kind of diversity, obviously it is our responsibility to start to walk the walk, and then we can expect that anybody else who's joining the international arbitration community will find that this has now become the culture and the norm, and will be able to take it forward. So with that, we have come to the end of this session. We have just about 3 minutes, and I would like to invite our session coordinator, Mr. Tonya Kukubo, to close the session.
Thank you very much, Laura. And Sarah and all the distinguished panelists. Please, another round of applause for them. My job is quite brief. So thank you on behalf of the Institute, Sarah in particular, for traveling such great distances to be with us here today. Most of you do not know Sarah had to go through 2 jurisdictions just to get to us today. We're indeed grateful. So we're going to do this in 2 ways. We would present our thank you plaques, just a little token. Gladys, please, Joy and Gladys, help us. And we'll call on our very revered Mrs. Funke Adekoya, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Chartered Arbitrator. Please, a warm round of applause for her to make this brief presentation. For Adrian, Sharon, and Mrs. Rosebible SAN, you will in due course get electronic copies, electronic plaques, Yes. Please.
This plaque is being presented to Sarah Malik by the Chartered Institute of Nigeria, Chartered Institute of Arbitrators Nigeria branch, in appreciation of your participation at this conference. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Laura. This plaque is being presented to you in appreciation of your presentation and your moderation of this afternoon session at this conference. Thank you.
Please, Leonard Silk, if you could just indulge us just one moment. If you could call the branch chair, our CPC chair, past chair of the Institute, Mr. Tunde Busere SAN, for a group photograph with the panelists. Thank you. I'm hoping the photo session is as diverse as we possibly can make it be. Thank you very much.
Can we please give the panelists another round of applause? I think we have come to the end of today's session at day 1 of our conference. And I think we have had a very successful day. Can you please give yourselves a round of applause? Day 2 of the conference starts tomorrow. It starts at 9 o'clock. And we urge you to please come early. As you know, the conference is hybrid. The login starts at 9 o'clock. All our online participants will join us at 9 o'clock. All our speakers will be available at 9 o'clock. So it's important that we are all seated before 9 o'clock. The social events of this conference continue this evening. I would have loved to invite all of you to have dinner with me and the governor, but unfortunately, it has been limited to just 25 people. And I understand that the list has been written. I've not even seen the list. So please forgive me if you are not on that list. But we have a social night today. We are all going to be at the Pleasure Summit this evening. I think probably from about 7:30, 8 o'clock this evening. And there are a lot of activities. There's a DJ there. There's going to be plenty of finger foods and drinks too. And it will be a very fantastic opportunity for us to network and also enjoy Ibadan and do all that we need to do to make us have all the fun we need to have. So I urge you all, you can go back to your hotels, relax, and plan to come out again this evening. The Pleasure Summit, I'm sure you can Google it. Unfortunately, I don't have the address, but I don't. Madam Tayo, do you know where it is? Iyagoku quarters. Don't worry, just go to your Google Maps, type Pleasure Summit. It's a notable lounge here in Ibadan, and then you get the directions. So I urge you, I want to thank you once again for staying the course from the morning, the opening session, the plenary session, the breakout sessions. And I'm sure that we have had a very intellectually stimulating conference. And we have also had the opportunity to link and network with some of our old friends. I see our friends from Sierra Leone here, Mr. Gaba, Edward Luke from Botswana, and many other people from other parts of Nigeria and the world. Our online participants and speakers, we thank you very much for joining this conference, for participating, and we look forward to you joining us again at 9 o'clock tomorrow. Tomorrow's sessions are also going to be very intellectually stimulating. So please plan to join the sessions. Some of you that have not been able to ask your questions at any of the sessions today, we are using the Woover application where you can interact with the speakers. You can ask them questions, and I'm sure they will oblige you with answers. Once again, thank you very much for being a wonderful audience, for participating in this conference on day 1. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow, day 2 of the conference. And remember, we have our gala night tomorrow too, an induction for some of our members. Thank you very much.